So will Singapore's opposition make historic inroads, or will the ruling PAP strengthen its already dominant political position? Let's get more on this. I'm joined by James Chin, who is a professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. James, good to have you back on the program. Now, this election is not about who will win, more likely that the PAP will return to power. But do you expect the opposition to gain some ground and win more than the 10 seats they already have in the parliament?
Good evening. So if you talk to people in Singapore, they will regard this election as a PAP election. It's really for PAP to lose for two very simple reasons. Just prior to this election, they redrew the boundaries. I think if you speak to most observers in Singapore, they will tell you that the boundaries were drawn in such a way that will advantage the PAP. The second reason why I said the PAP is likely to do better this time is because of the Trump effect. As usual, Trump has targeted world trade, or he's in the process of trying to redraw the map of international trade. And Singapore is really a trading nation. There's nothing in Singapore other than trade externally. So in terms of uncertainty, you expect the voters to flee to safety, right? So in this case, it is very likely that due to economic uncertainty, they're more likely to vote for the PAP. So for these two primary reasons, I expect the PAP to do very well. The key barometer people in Singapore use is the percentage of popular votes. Last time they got about 61% of the popular vote. So for a person like Lawrence Wong, the incumbent prime minister, he can't afford to lose more than 7 or 8% of votes. But I expect him to get somewhere around 55 to 60% of votes. And in terms of the seat, I expect him to hold between 75 to 85. So even if there is an increase in the number of seats for the opposition, we're looking at an increase of about 4 or 5 seats. But it's very likely to be a status quo.
Yeah, so might this be seen perhaps also as a referendum on the leadership of this new Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong?
It is not so much seen as a referendum. Usually when we have what they call a generation change in Singapore, this is the 4th generation, what you have is really a popularity vote for the PAP, whether the current voters in Singapore are happy with the way the PAP is sort of pursuing its policies. Now, when Lawrence Wong came in, he made it very clear that he has his own way of doing things. People keep forgetting that for the first 3 generations, right, basically the PAP was run by a single family, right? The Lee family, the first prime minister, they gave a stopgap prime minister. Then the 3rd prime minister was the son of Lee Kuan Yew again. So this is really a signal that Singapore is heading around the corner. We're going to a real post-Lee period in Singapore. So it's very much an election about how the Singaporean voter feel about the post-Lee environment.
Yes, and what is your assessment of the opposition? And I'll perhaps limit that to the Workers' Party. Pretty much they've got all the opposition seats in Parliament. How do you expect them to perform this time round?
Right. So all the momentum on the opposition side appears after the 9-day campaign period, appears to be with the Workers' Party. They have the most, media-savvy group of candidates. And also in terms of social media, they seem to be out there all the time. But like I said, people in the social media may say they support the Workers' Party, but once they're at the ballot box, I think because of the trade uncertainty, because Singaporeans, if there's one thing about Singaporeans, right, the number one issue is always the cost of living, followed by the economy. And these two are linked together. And when they look at the situation in the international arena now, they're very worried, like, what is Trump going to do? Because as I mentioned earlier, Singapore is just a trading nation. Without trade, Singapore will die.
Yes, and of course, as you mentioned before, many voters on the minds with what's happening with Donald Trump and the tariffs would probably turn to safety. But in that vein, do you think it's been a level playing field for the opposition outside of what you said before, the redrawing of the boundaries?
Sure. So all the elections in Singapore is seen as free but never fair. So for example, prior to social media, right, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right, you can see that all the media are controlled by the PAP government, and they've been very careful about the way they control the media. So what is not widely known in outside Singapore is that they actually have laws in Singapore that can control foreign media as well. So for example, a couple of years ago, they brought into a law in Singapore that gives the government the right to force social media companies like Facebook, whoever it is, right, to publish what they call a correction to any items they deem not true. So those laws are still in place. So the way to understand Singapore is that Singapore, on the one hand, is a very free country. Everyone has access to the internet. You can travel freely. In fact, the only place you can fly when you fly from Changi is to another country. There's no second airport in Singapore. So in that way, it's a very, very free country. You can do whatever business you want. But on the other hand, the government keep a very, very strong rule over the population. And in some ways, you can argue that this is very much the classic hybrid state. The government, has sort of an unofficial social contract with the population in return for a good life, economic prosperity, clean and a safe place, good education system, good public transport, access to public housing, all those things. In return, you have to give up some of your individual rights.
Yes. And finally, James, I'm going to put up a picture of this pair of brothers. On the left is Ong Ye Kung, that's Singapore's health minister who is running in that election. And on the right is his brother Howard, who's contesting the seat of Tang Ni in WA for the Liberal Party here in the federal election. So, James, is this simply coincidence, or in this case, does, like the Lee family, politics run in the family?
Well, you can argue that it is running in a family because people don't realize that one of their cousins is also currently an MP in Singapore. So it's not only the health minister, their first cousin is also MP in Singapore, and this is the elder brother. But what is interesting is that this has generated a lot of buzz and interest in the Australian community, especially those from Malaysia and Singapore, because the MP is standing against Sam Lim, as you know, has a Malaysian background. And traditionally, there's been fierce rivalry between Singapore and Malaysia. So this is very much a repeat of the rivalry between Malaysia and Singapore, but held on Australian soil.
Yes, an interesting one and a testament to our multicultural nation here in Australia. James Chin, always good to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.